Alrighty, so welcome to video number 2, where we're going to be looking at question number 4. So for this question here, we want to select all of the equivalent forms of 225%. So if we're looking at this right now, we got 0.225, 2.25, 22.5, so these are our decimals, and then we got our favorite friend, fractions. Remember, fractions are our friends. And I feel like some of you guys are already saying no, but remember, you guys do want to be comfortable working with fractions, all right? Because fractions are our friends. But let's go ahead and look at these problems here. So since we're trying to figure out which of these are going to be our equivalent form, we want to make sure we're converting these into percentages. So let's start with our decimals. What you want to remember, to turn a decimal into a percentage, you are multiplying that by 100. So let's take this first decimal over here. We got 0.225. Let's multiply this by 100. And when we do that, make sure you do type this into your calculator, because we're going to see we get 22.5%. The placement of the decimal does make a difference here. A common mistake I'll see is that people sometimes just look at this and they think, oh yeah, multiplying that by 100? Yeah, that should be 225%. But they didn't check it in a calculator. So they were off ever so slightly because that decimal is in the right spot, but they put this as an answer when it's not. So please make sure you are checking your work in a calculator. You have calculators for a reason. Please use them. If we look at our second decimal over here though, we got 2.25%. Let's go ahead and take this. Let's multiply this by 100. And when we do that, we would get 225%. That's what we're looking for here. So this is an equivalent form. So we can go ahead and take this and check that, because that's one of our answers. Let's look at our third decimal then. We got 22.5. So let's take this. Again, let's multiply it by 100, because it's a select all. So that means there is going to be more than one answer here. So if we take this and we multiply it by 100, we would have 2,250%. That doesn't match up. So the only decimal we have here that's equivalent is the 2.25. Let's look at our fractions now. For our fractions, we want to see how do we turn a fraction into a percentage. There's a couple of different ways to do this, but for the purpose of this video, I'm just really going to talk about one where we're going to take our fraction and turn it into a decimal. Once we get our decimal, we're going to take that and turn it into a percentage. All right. So let's look at our first fraction. We got 225 over 1,000. Fraction to a decimal. Hopefully you remember this if you look back at the first video, or if you maybe started over here. Hopefully you still do remember this though. We're taking our numerator, that's the top number, divided by, because the fraction bar, that math operation really is division, we're going to divide it by our denominator. That's the bottom part of the fraction. So we're going to take 225, and we are going to divide that by 1,000. If we type this into our calculator, we are going to get 0.225. Let me fix my first 2. There we go. All right. So this is our decimal. Let's take that decimal now and multiply it by 100. And I'm going to show my multiplication here using that parentheses, because remember, when you see those two sets of parentheses next to each other, that means you are multiplying. When we multiply these though, we're going to get 22.5%. This is not quite what we're looking for here. So this does not work. All right. Let's go ahead then and look at our next one here. We have 225 over 100. Again, I want to take my fraction and just turn it into a decimal. So let's take 225. We can divide that by 100. When we divide this by 100, we're going to get the decimal, 2.25. And again, to turn our decimal into an equivalent percent, we're going to just take our decimal and multiply it by 100. So when we multiply this by 100, we get 225%. Hey, that's what we're looking for here. So this works. All right. Let's go ahead now and look at our next fraction. We got 9/40ths. Even though the numbers look kind of weird, we're still doing the same process. We're going to go ahead and take our numerator divided by our denominator. So when we go ahead and type in 9 divided by 40 in our calculators, we're going to get 0.225. And then we can take our decimal here, and we're going to multiply it by 100. And when we do that, we're going to get our percent 22.5%. So not quite what we're looking for here. For our last one, we're going to go ahead though and take that 9 and divide it by 4. When we go ahead and divide those, we're going to get the decimal 2.25. And finally, we're going to multiply this by 100. So we get our percentage 225%. That matches our percentage here, so this is an equivalent form. So we got 3 answers from this one, but this is how we are able to get our answers here. All right. In the next video, we're going to be looking at problem number 5. If you already know how to do that, feel free to go ahead and jump around between the videos. Otherwise, see you in the next one.